You're listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
I wanna see the light.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Give God 90. My name is Jerry Mitchell, your host. Sitting in the supervisor's chair, which may get used tonight, is Myra.
Hey, everyone.
You'll understand when we get there. Trust me. I will say this. Here's your warning. I may have a tendency to get just a little uptight, maybe later. You'll understand when I get there. We certainly appreciate each and every one of you sharing your day with us. If you like what you hear, you can share this out there. It's, it goes out to a lot of places, and a lot of people are listening. We really appreciate it. Just go ahead. Don't be afraid of the likes and the shares and notifications. If you want to leave us a comment, either on the podcast directly, you can do that with if you have the Spreaker app and you're listening that way, you can. If you want to look us up on social media, we're all over the place there too. I need to tell you something that a lot of you have been waiting for. Are you ready for this? Inheriting Lies should be available next week. My third book. It brings some verses together like you've probably only ever heard here. Okay? What I tried to do was put together a forensic Bible study that really does dig through the language, the culture, and history of this book of books we call the Bible, and compare that to what's being taught today. The traditions, the legends, church doctrines that many of us follow are actually driving a wedge between believers and the Creator. I like to think that there are many, many people among the body of believers, both Christian and our Jewish brothers and sisters. They really do love the Almighty and they want to please Him, but they're restricted by the traditions and the doctrines that prevent them from having that relationship with their Creator that they desire to have. Our Creator already desires it, and many of us desire it. But it gets in, our traditions, our doctrines get in the way. So in this book, you're probably going to find a lot of answers to a lot of your questions. You may find some answers to questions you never knew you had, because there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of information in here. And if you go to givegod90.com, you'll see a picture of it. Put it right on the front page. So it's there. You'll know what you're looking for. I don't have the ordering information yet. The publisher hasn't given that to me, but we should have it hopefully next week, I believe, is what she told me. So there, the wait is just about over. The anticipation is building. When I put that out on one of the social media sites I'm on, I had somebody message me and said, "I can't wait. You've got to tell me the answer to this." And I said, "Well, I'll give you part of the answer." Just kind of whetting the appetite just a little bit. But, a lot of the things we deal with, you have to explain it in such a way because you've got to undo all the legends and traditions before you can actually explain the real answer. So, and a lot of what we do here is we peel away the traditions and the legends and the doctrines so that you can understand what's really being looked at. There's a lot of fancy words that we use, in and around the Christian and Jewish religion. And, oh, hi, I'm glad you're here tonight. And a lot of these words that we use, we don't understand, or we use them improperly. And that creates some misrepresentation. So that's what we're going to look at. And we're going to start with atonement. So Myra's going to read this passage, and it's going to be interesting.
You are to take the ram of ordination and boil its flesh in a holy place. At the entrance of the tent of meeting, Aaron and his sons are to eat the meat of the ram and the bread that is in the basket. They must eat those things by which atonement was made for their ordination and consecration. But no outsider may eat them, because these things are sacred. And if any of the meat of ordination or bread is left until morning, you are to burn up the remainder. It is not to be eaten because it is sacred. Exodus 9, verse 31 through 34.
Okay, now this is not the first time this word's used in the Bible. Excuse me. But it is the first time it's translated as atonement. The first time it's used is actually in Genesis 6:14. And that is, make an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without with pitch. Now that doesn't sound like a lot of help right there, does it? So atonement is pitch. No, not really. Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood, make rooms in the ark, and coat it with pitch inside and out. You see, the word atonement comes from the Hebrew word kafar. And if you're keeping track, that's Strong's number 3722. And it's the definition of it is actually to cover or to cover over. And if kafar sounds kind of familiar, it's the root word of kippah, where we get, you might be familiar with yarmulke. It actually means to cover. Atonement, of course, is the English verb used for the word atone. So we might be, if you're like me, you're curious to know what the proper definition of atone is. Now, when the Bible was first translated into English, we didn't use a lot of the words we use today the same way, right? And Noah Webster, back in 1828, published his American Dictionary of the English Language, and it is the actual first American dictionary we have as close to when the Bible was translated into English as we have. And he uses the definitions primarily from the way they're used in the Bible, the way the translators would have understood them. And according to Noah Webster, the word atone means to agree or be in accordance with, or to accord. It can also mean to make compensation or amends. You see, when we're in agreement with someone, or when we compensate someone, it's a mutual understanding between both parties. In the sense of compensation, it means you gave me something, so I owe you its value, right? That's if you need to pay compensation. You give just value based on your mutual agreement because you're in accord with each other. Does all that, you're following? Okay.
Yes.
When we offer an atonement to our Creator, we accept the boundaries or the regulations that He requires to accept it, meaning we agree to live by His rules. There's a bunch of church folks out there just gasped. I can hear it through the airwaves. Now, the way that the early Hebrew people would have considered this is, I hope my actions are sufficient to cover my transgressions. Of course, we know that if you are truly repentant, it is. That's over and over and over again we read that. And I needed to go through the atonement because we really today don't use those words the same. I've heard them used a lot of times improperly or so far out of context, it's ridiculous. And I had to get that out of the way and let you know that, atonement is like a covering. When you atone for something, your transgressions are covered. They no longer, and I don't want to say they no longer matter, that's the wrong phrase to use, but it's similar to that. They're covered up. They're still there. They're just, you can't see them. You don't pay any attention to them. Unfortunately, we can't always throw them away because they're always going to be, under that cover, under that blanket, in a box somewhere, in a corner somewhere. You've heard me talk about Ezekiel 18 before. It's kind of the same thing, right? They're always there. They're just not mentioned. So think about that, because the next thing we're going to look at is the word righteous. Now, for a lot of people today, they think righteous, that they just think it means being good. Or some people might think it's following a certain set of churchy rules. But the word righteous doesn't mean that at all if we're going to define it using the Bible. It is possible to be good without being righteous. If someone donates to charity, they're considered a good person today, right? But that doesn't mean they're righteous. Think about Noah and Abraham, and even John the Baptist's parents, Zacharias and Elizabeth, were all said to be righteous. But what exactly was it that made them righteous? In Genesis 6:9, it describes Noah this way. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. Now, that's the King James Bible. The Berean Study Bible reads this way. This is the account of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. See the difference? Now, if you speak Elizabethan English, you would understand the King James Version. But I don't know very many people that actually speak Elizabethan English today. Not as an everyday communication language anyway. John the Baptist's parents are described this way by Luke. There was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, a certain priest named Zacharias of the course of Abia, and his wife was the daughter of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. And they were both righteous before God, walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord, blameless. You see, righteousness follows atonement. After you cover or compensate for your transgressions, your sins, the Creator then says, okay, you've repented, now go and sin no more. Right? What does that mean? It means that now you're starting kind of with a blank slate. You've still got the scars, you've still got the hurt, you've still got the pain, but now you can move forward and all of that stuff will be covered up. Everything that caused the hurt and the pain and the grief will be covered up. You don't need to mention it again. And you begin this righteous path, and it's kind of interesting because you don't need to, but you should want to. You should have that desire. We don't need to be obedient, right? You look around the world today. There's a lot of people that are not obedient to the Creator. The desire to be obedient is from understanding that we are not terminal beings. We are eternal beings. And if we're concerned about our eternal self, and we don't have any desire for the punishment that we deserve, we should be willingly obedient to the Creator's instruction. David uses this concept in Psalm 143, if you want to read that passage.
Lord, hear my prayer. Listen to my cry for mercy. Come to help me, because you are loyal and good. Don't judge me, your servant, because no one alive is right before you. Mine enemies are chasing me. They have crushed me in the ground. They have made me live in darkness like those who are long dead. I am afraid. My courage is gone. Psalms 143, 1 through 4.
So no one alive is righteous in your eyes, or so it seemed to David. Today, we think of justified as being legitimate or cleared of wrongdoing. But when the Bible was first translated into English, it actually meant to conform to the law. So when the Bible translators were considering words that they wanted to use that meant we would agree with the Creator's instructions, it made sense to use the word justified. In David's psalm, we see that he uses the word righteous to mean that no one wanted to be obedient to the Creator. And in David's time, when he wrote this, he was probably thinking of all the evil, not only that he had done, but that was surrounding him as well. Much like we look around the world today and think kind of the same thing, right? Well, in this world, nobody is actually righteous. But there are people that are striving to be. If we put this in a civil sense, somebody else may be able to pay the fine for our offense, but if jail time is required, it's the offender that needs to go to prison. When we offend the Creator, we are the ones who must become righteous in His eyes, even though someone else may have made it possible for us to have that opportunity. For the Christians who have been taught that Jesus paid the price so they can continue sinning, they're going to have a very bad ending because they are the ones who need to cover or atone for themselves and repent so they can come into agreement and live the way they're designed to live. You have to be the one who decides to walk in all the commandments and ordinances of the Creator. Nobody else can do that for you. And, another word we don't use properly today is sanctification. The first time it's actually used is in Genesis 2:3. God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, that in it He rested from all the work which God created and made. Here's where I tend to get a little uptight. And you'll see why. The word we look at as sanctified actually comes from the Hebrew word kadosh, to be set apart or consecrated. If you're keeping score, it's Strong's number 6942, and it's very, very closely related to the word kadosh. And, meaning holy, right? Here's where I get irritated. a lot of churches a lot of churches understand today that they cannot consecrate a building until it's paid for. You see, you can't consecrate something you don't own, or it's not under your jurisdiction. It's not under your control. You can dedicate it, but you can't consecrate it. Moses was actually able to consecrate the people because they were under his leadership. That's found in Exodus 19:14. I'll try to stay calm. The Creator himself set apart the seventh day. He created it, and so he owns it. Let me read Isaiah 58:13-14. If you turn your foot from breaking the Sabbath, from doing as you please on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight and the Lord's holy day honorable, if you honor it by not going your own way or seeking your own pleasure or speaking idle words, that's not IDOL, it's IDLE, then you will delight yourself in the Lord, and I will make you ride on the heights of the land and feed you with the heritage of your father Jacob, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Of course, that comes from King James. What he's saying is, if you guard the Sabbath, if you do what I tell you to do and don't do what you want to do, right? Do what your own pleasure is. If you do what the Almighty instructs you to do, then you will delight yourself in him, and he will make you ride on the heights of the land and feed you with the heritage of Jacob. That right there should be enough to prove that no man had the authority to change Sabbath. They can't consecrate it. They can't even ordain it. The Sabbath day remains under the ownership of the Creator. Mankind is created. We don't have the authority to change what the Creator has already set apart for his pleasure. To do so, according to the Bible, is sin. How many times have I read you 1 John 3:4? Everyone who practices sin practices lawlessness as well. Sin is lawlessness. Sin is a violation of the instructors that our Creator has established for us to live by. No man has ever been given the authority to change anything that the Creator has already established. It doesn't matter what you've been told. It doesn't matter what you taught. This is God's universe, and we need to pay attention to his rules, not our made-up, messy, sloppy rules. I'm trying to stay calm. I really am. The Almighty did give mankind dominion over the animals and the plants, but he never relinquishes the ownership of anything he created, and that includes his Sabbath, his day of rest. When he said, "This is it," he meant, "This is it." Yeah, I know. When I came out of church, I had a lot of making up to do, right? I needed a really, really big cover. Just saying. But if I can do it, you can do it. Yeah, there is sometimes some things you wonder about, you study out, and you work it out in fear and trembling. And you hope you made the right decision. But think about that. No one has ever had the authority to change anything that the Almighty has already established. It doesn't matter who it is, not even Paul. Now, I need to explain something here. The reason the priests were able to consecrate the tabernacle and the things in it they had actually been given jurisdiction over those things. They were responsible for those things. Making sure that the tabernacle and the temple and all the items that went in it were proper. That was a responsibility of the priesthood. Some people were dedicated, right, to the service of the Creator, but their parents didn't even have the authority to consecrate them. That comes from the Creator himself, because he created us. And I thought I was going to go a little long. Sorry. But I need to mention one more thing. Because you heard the word ordained earlier. And I know a lot of churches and even some synagogues today ordain pastors and rabbis, and yes, they can do that because the church or the synagogue is the organization that has chosen to give them a title. Now, here's the lowdown on why they don't necessarily need to be believers today. And I'm talking about pastors and rabbis, okay? The organization itself does not have the authority to make someone a leader, but that doesn't mean they aren't chosen by the Creator. The Hebrew word asah means to make. Okay? And like I say, if you're keeping score, it's Strong's number 6213. And there's an interesting verse that I kind of like. It's found in John 15, verse 16. You have not chosen me. I have chosen you and ordained you, that you should go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatever you ask of in the Father, whatever you shall ask of the Father in my name, he'll give it to you. And anyone who knows the name Yeshua, Jesus, actually means God is our salvation, or Yah is our salvation, technically. So if you give believing that your salvation comes from the Almighty, then if you ask for something that he is in agreement with, because you need to be in agreement with him, right? It's a two-way street, then you get it. So if you're ever wondering why all the people who's like, oh, I got to win the lottery, Lord, I got bills to pay, they're not in agreement. Some people do win the lottery. Some people don't. Most people don't. But if you pray for it and don't get it, chances are you don't get it because you're not in agreement. Don't want to go down that rabbit trail too far. I'll get upset again. So when in John 15:16, Yeshua is speaking to the disciples, and he tells them, you didn't choose me. I chose you. I made you. I turned you into the people who would be able to go out and teach others, and they were going to teach others to do things that they had been taught to do. But what did he teach? What was Yeshua teaching the disciples to do? And I'm not just talking about the 12, all of them. For you Christians, you should remember that, he sent 70 pairs out. That's a lot more than 12 by my math. He taught his disciples to obey the Creator's instructions willingly, to remember the law that was given through Moses, and to do it. And that's exactly what they did. Even the most conservative rabbis will admit that, right? They don't like to, but they'll admit it. The disciples left behind all of their traditions, all of their religious doctrine, all of the rabbinic law, so that they would be able to be in complete agreement with the Creator, in one accord with the Almighty himself, so that they themselves might be found righteous, even though they got a lot of things wrong. And let's face it, they did. They did. They weren't perfect. But they chose obedience to the Creator over obedience of man. I just answered a question from somebody a while ago. They were talking about Sukkot. And they found this little technical glitch that they thought they could get out of Sukkot with. And, so you're not in Israel. Big deal. So you might not be, a child of Abraham. Big deal. I don't think the Almighty is going to turn away anyone who wants to come to him the way he wants them to come to him. If you hear my voice and obey my commands, then you will be my people, and I will be your God. Kind of an important condition right there, in my opinion. And that opinion is not very humble either. Today we have an opportunity that's given to each and every one of us to be just like the disciples. You can learn to leave your traditions and your traditions behind. You can learn to leave all of the stuff that doesn't matter. And you can learn to live the way you are designed to live. You can choose the Creator. If you're concerned about your eternity, you might really want to consider that. If you don't care, you're probably not listening to this anyway. But on the off chance that you do care, maybe you should try doing things the way you're designed to do them and not going your own way. I know a lot of people, and I had this conversation, I think it was yesterday. A lot of people think they can go their own way and then eventually come back around. But there's a lot of those people that are going their own way, and they just keep going down and down and down. And finally, at some point, they reach where you just can't go any farther down, and they have to look up to see the underside of down. That's a low point. That's an extremely low point. Unfortunately, it's where a lot of people are going to find themselves before they're willing to repent, before they're willing to do what it takes. If a carpenter hits his thumb with a hammer, and it's happened often, it hurts. But they eventually learn not to do that. Right? Most of them. The good ones. Myra's smiling at me.
At least most of the time.
The interesting thing about that is it's just like people. You eventually figure out that the more often you hit yourself with a hammer, the more it hurts, the longer it takes to heal. Why wait? But we do. Why keep going down when you have the opportunity at least to level out, if not elevate, and come back so that you can help someone else? That's the fruit that remains. When you come back up and you're living the way you're designed to live and you can help someone else, it teaches them to come up and help somebody else up. It's not a competition because you're all going to get there at the same time. This, I know Paul says we run the race, but the concept of the race is it's a tie with everybody who has a desire to get into the New Jerusalem anyway. Don't keep going down. Learn to live the way you are designed to live. And I know I've thrown a lot of information out there tonight. Please don't get overwhelmed. It's not difficult. You just have to recognize these words when you hear them and question the user. Don't be afraid to say, are you sure that's really the word you meant? Don't be afraid to say, I'm not really sure exactly what you mean, but I'm pretty sure that word doesn't fit what you just said. I've done that. And it drives pastors up a wall. Drives a lot of people up the wall. Drives a lot of pastors' wives up the wall, too. That's another story. You know, when we hear these things, and I know I've gotten some questions about why are you so intent on using and defining words properly? If we can't communicate, how then can I teach you to come up? How can I show you how, you know, if we're not communicating properly, I can't tell you where the ladder is so that you can help yourself. If we're not communicating properly, I can't show you the door that you need to go through to exit where you're at to get to be where you want to be. That's why using language properly is so important. And I'm a bad one to talk about this because, you know, my everyday language, you know, a lot of times people look at me funny and say, what are you talking about? But part of that is because I use words properly. It drives our grandchildren crazy when they'll come up and say, where's my crayons? I said, I didn't know you had one. They're talking about crayons, right? But they're not pronouncing it right. And it drives them up a wall. But if you're not communicating properly, and it's easier to teach them at a young age than it is an older age, then nobody's going to know what you're talking about. They might think they know what you're talking about, but they're really not going to understand what you mean. And if you really want to help somebody, give them the help they need, which isn't always the help they want. That's why language is so important. It's why we dig through the language, the culture, and the history to make sure that what was written is the way we understand it. Not the way we might want to understand it, but the way it should be understood. Did you have anything you wanted to add to all of that?
Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us as Jerry teaches the Creator's instructions.
Well, I try. I'm glad I've got a big book to quote from. We won't be here Monday. We'll be away next week. There won't be a live podcast next week. I will either record something for you or I will pick something from the archives. We will be away attempting to figure out where we're supposed to be going. So, until next Monday, many, many blessings, everyone.